Hi, my name is Amanda Ziva. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. Today, to celebrate National Poetry Month, because it's April, I'm going to be sharing with you the book Hidden by Helen Frost, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to have a chance to talk with Helen and share some thoughts not only about this book, but about her writing process and her advice for young writers. Before I read the first little bit of this, I'm going to read the back so you understand this story. Helen has many novels in verse. This that I could have picked from, but this is one of the first books of hers that I read and fell in love with, and one of the first books that were novel in verse that I read and fell in love with that format through it. So I'm so grateful to Helen, not only for talking with us later, but also for introducing me to this amazing style of storytelling. When Wren and Darra meet at age 14, they recognize each other instantly, though they've never actually seen each other. It has been 6 years since something happened that affected both of them profoundly. Darra's father stole a car and drove it home, not knowing that Wren was hiding in the back. Darra was the only one who guessed that Wren stayed hidden in their locked garage. For Wren, hungry, thirsty, trapped, and terrified, the hours dragged on as she searched for a way out. Now, in Cabin 8 at Camp Oakwood, each girl knows the other's most private secret, and neither of them wants to talk about what happened. For the most part, they manage to avoid each other until their life-saving teacher introduces a game called Drown Last, and Wren and Darra meet underwater in an intense encounter that leaves them both gasping for air and answers when they surface. Using a different poetic structure for each voice, Helen Frost reveals what is hidden in this poignant, multi-layered story of friendship and forgiveness. And so this book does have sections and chapters, so you can break it up, but it's not necessarily a traditional first chapter the way that I usually read to you. So I am just going to read to you the first 24 pages. Part 1, The Way You Might Remember Your Best Friend, Wren Abbott. I was a happy little girl wearing a pink dress, sitting in our gold minivan, dancing with my doll Kamara. "I'll be right back," Mom promised. "Leave the music on," I begged. So she left her keys dangling while she ran in to pay for gas and buy a Diet Coke. I think about that little girl the way you might remember your best friend who moved away. Sitting in the middle seat beside an open window, her seatbelt fastened, she looked out at the world. And then she heard a gunshot from inside the store. That's when I stopped breathing. I clicked off my seatbelt, dived into the backseat, and ducked down on the floor to hide under a blanket until Mom came back out. I heard the car door open, heard it close. The music stopped. Why? Mom liked that song. I breathed again. Mom smelled like cigarettes. I pushed the blanket off my face, opened my mouth to ask, what happened in there? But then I heard a word Mom wouldn't say. A man's voice. "Come on, start," he was yelling at our car. And the car obeyed him. It started up, just like it thought it was Mom driving. Who was driving? Had this man just shot someone? Had he just shot Mom? If he found out I was back there, what would he do to me? I pulled the blanket over my face. Pretend you're Kamara. Don't breathe. Don't move. Be as small as you can. Be smaller. Sand on the floor of the car. I pressed hard. It stuck to my skin. I pressed harder. Breathe if you have to, but don't move a muscle. Small like a rabbit that knows a cat is close by. I paid attention. I didn't twitch. I could tell which way we were headed. We stopped at the King Street stoplight. Left turn, right turn, left. He sped up. Was he trying to throw the police off our trail? He stopped, got out of the car. Where were we? He got back in, drove off faster. Sirens. Yes, coming closer. One time in first grade, a police officer came to our class. "If someone tries to grab you," she said, "wave your arms and kick your legs, yell at the top of your lungs, 'This man is not my father.'" The sirens meant that someone might stop us. I could jump up. I could wave. I could yell. But it didn't happen. We drove faster. Farther. The sirens faded away in the distance. Long, straight road. Curvy road. Fast for a while, no stops, right turn, left turn, stop, go, turn. I swallowed the panic that rose up. I didn't throw up. Sound of gravel, dust in my throat. Don't cough. Bumping along that dusty road, screaming inside, Dad, where are you? Mom? A phone rang. Dad's ring, on Mom's phone. Mom must have left her phone in the car. Her whole purse down on the floor. Do not jump up and grab it. I clenched my hands together. GPS, the man snarled. I heard him dump Mom's purse upside down. He opened a window. He closed it. Did he just toss Mom's phone out the window? I put my thumb in my mouth like a little baby. I pulled my knees to my chin and closed my eyes tight. Where were we going? What would happen to me when we got there? After a long time, it felt like hours, the car slowed down. We made a sharp turn. We stopped. He got out. I heard the garage door open. He got back in the car. Forward. Stop. The garage door came down. The car door opened, slammed shut. I heard a dog barking, growling, in the garage or outside. Another door opened and closed. Had the man gone somewhere? Carefully, I pushed back the blanket and looked around. I was alone in a very dark place. I might have been wrong about Mom's phone. I kept my head low, climbed into the middle seat, leaned far enough forward so I could see into the front. Mom's water bottle, not quite empty. A chocolate chip granola bar, Kleenex, chapstick, calendar, checkbook, her little album of pictures, me and Alex, her and Dad. No wallet. She took that into the store. No phone. Where was I? A messy garage, rakes and shovels, gas cans and broken down boxes. In the garage door, higher than I could reach, 3 small windows, a few rays of sun shining through them. Behind an old freezer, a door to outside, a red and white boat on a trailer right next to the car. If I get out fast enough, he'd never know I was there. I told myself what to do and I did it. Quietly. Get out of the car with Kamara. Take the granola bar. Leave the water. If I take that, he might notice it's gone. Carefully tiptoe across the floor. The dog, outside, still growl barking. Squeeze behind the freezer. Try to open the door. Locked. With a padlock. The size of my fist. The freezer was empty. Unplugged. It wouldn't be cold. Could I get inside and hide there? No. A boy on the news got stuck inside an old freezer and he suffocated to death before his mom found him. I shivered. The boat? I might be tall enough to climb in if I stepped on the trailer. But I didn't dare move. I don't know how long I stood there in my pink dress mostly hidden behind the freezer. A light came on. A door opened. I stopped breathing. From another room I heard happy voices. Real people or a TV? It was a TV. This was someone's house. The man came out, opened the car door, closed it, went back inside. I was pretty sure he didn't look over at me. I had to do something. I ran to the boat and climbed in. It was full of fishing stuff, nets and ropes, a tackle box, fishing poles, a rusty coffee can, a blue cloth partially stretched over the boat. Could I hide under that? At the boat's pointed end, a triangular place, like a little cave. I just fit. A gray rag? No, an old sweatshirt, wadded up on the floor of the boat. I put it on, and it covered my dress. Yes, I could hide in the boat. For a while. I was hungry. Mom always said, eat something, Wren, it helps you think. I unwrapped the granola bar, took one bite, one more, another. I tried to think. Could I open the garage door? If it was something to lift, could I lift it? What if you had to know certain numbers to push? If the door opened, he'd hear me. Sooner or later, he'd leave the house. He had to. Did anyone live here with him? The dog barked louder. It was outside, but not far away. Had anyone fed it? Through the windows and the garage door, the sky got darker and darker. Someone turned on a light and opened the door from the house. I thought I heard something out here, a girl's voice said. I didn't move, curled up in the boat, clutching Kamara so hard I thought she might crack. The man again from inside. "Shut that door. Stay out of there. You heard me, I said." The light went off. The door slammed shut. It sounded like somebody banged up against it. The girl yelled, "Ow, quit it, that hurt." Then it got quiet after that. For a long time, nothing happened. The garage door went up. The light came on. Somewhere outside, a car door opened and closed. I heard someone walk through the garage and open the door to the house. A woman's voice. "What's this car doing here?" The man. "How many times do I have to tell you? Stay out of my business." The woman. "You keep a stolen car garage and it is my business." The light went off. The garage door closed. The other door slammed. I heard shouting inside the house. I couldn't hear words, but the man's voice was loud and mean. I was shaking, trying hard not to cry. How could I sleep in the crowded boat? I was thirsty, hungry. I had to pee. The light came on. The door from the house flew open. The woman. "This is the car they're searching for. What happened to Wren Abbott?" A voice on the TV. "Once again, the child is 8 years old, last seen wearing a pink dress with matching beads in her hair. She may be holding a doll she calls Kamara. If you have any information, please call." The TV cut off. The man. "Nothing to do with me. You think I'm some kind of pervert taking a little kid?" What's a pervert? The woman. "Of course not, but West, did you check the back seat when you got in the car?" The man's name is West. West. "No, there wasn't time. None of this worked out like we planned, Stacy. No one was going to get shot." Who got shot? The woman's name is Stacy. I heard the car doors opening, closing. Stacy. "She's not in the car. Where is she?" West. "Maybe she got out when I stopped in the parking lot. I took a few minutes to take the plate off another car and put it on this one." That time he stopped. Could I have jumped out? Stacy. "If she was lost in a parking lot, someone would have found her by now. They've been searching for more than 6 hours. West. "They can keep searching. Tomorrow we paint the car, we ditch it. Nothing to pin on me." Stacy. "West, this girl is Darra's age. We can call from a payphone anonymously. Tell them Wren Abbott is not in the car they're searching for. At least we know that much." The girl. Her name is Darra. West. "We know nothing. You hear me?" Stacy. "Let go of me." I'd never heard the sound of one person hitting another, but I knew that was what happened. Stacy stopped talking, started crying. The door slammed again. More yelling, crashing sounds. Silence. The door opened. Darra's voice. "Stay out here tonight. He won't hurt you if you stay out of his way. I bet you're hungry. Here's some food and water." The door closed. Who was she talking to? Does she know I'm here? Someone, Darra, was in the garage, moving around, coming closer, right in the boat with me. I yelped. I couldn't help it. Meow. A cat, scratching my face, barely missing my eye. We looked at each other. Carefully, I reached out to pet it. After a while, we both calmed down. It curled up in my arms and purred. When the cat jumped out of the boat, I watched it. A litter box? Not too far away. Maybe I could... I had to. I did. I got back in the boat. The cat came too. It settled beside me. We fell asleep. When I woke up, the cat was gone. A few rays of light came in through the windows. I watched the light move from one window to another. I smelled cigarettes. West was in the garage. I heard the door open. Darra. "Daddy, I'm hungry." West. "Tell your mother." Darra. "Mommy has a headache?" West. "Tell her I said to quit crying and get up and feed you, and tell her I need her out here." I was hungry too. My stomach was growling. Stomach, please, please be quiet. He'll hear you. I smelled the kind of ointment you put on something that hurts. Stacy? Darra. "Archie, where are you?" The cat? "Here, Archie." Yes, they call the cat Archie. Darra might look in the boat for her cat. Should I try to look like a gray sweatshirt wadded up on the floor of the boat, under the blue boat cover, or should I let Darra see me? I didn't know who I could trust. I stayed quiet. I hid. West, hand me a can of spray paint. No, not that one, dark green. He never thanks her when she does what he says. Stacy, we should open the door and get some fresh air in here. West, I'm not taking chances. Someone could drive by and see what we're doing. It hurt to breathe. My eyes watered. My throat burned. Stacy, Darra, you better go back inside. I don't want you breathing these fumes. I heard Darra go in and come right back out. Darra, Mommy, those people are on TV again. Stacy, turn it up. Wes, turn it off. The TV got louder. Darra is brave. News voice. Wren Abbott, age 8, missing since yesterday. West, I said turn it off. I heard my dad's voice. Keep the car. Just return our daughter to us. Wren, if you hear this, try to get to a phone and call home. He said us. Dad and Alex? Or could it mean Mom was alive? A knot inside me loosened a little. West, Darra, I said shut it off. The TV voices stopped. And shut that door. The door closed. How could I get to a phone? West, good enough. By the time the paint dries, it'll be dark out. I'll drive the pickup. You two will follow in this car. We'll leave it in the mall parking lot. No one will ever know it's been here. They all went inside. I let myself cough just a little. Will anyone know I've ever been here? The door opened again. Who was in the garage? Stacy. Darra, if you wanted to hide out here, where would you hide? Darra. In there, I guess. What? No, don't ever get inside an old freezer. I mean, I keep meaning to take its door off, but, oh, thank God, she's not. Darra, whenever Archie gets scared of Dad, he goes in the boat. I could jump out and pretend it was some kind of game. Hide and seek. Found me. But would Darra and Stacy hide me? Wes might come out any minute. I felt someone touch my knee. I didn't move. I squeezed my eyes shut. Darra, no, Mom, she's not in the boat. Stacy, where could she be? They went back inside. Darra came out again. Here you go. Some more food? I cleaned the litter box. I knew she was talking to Archie, but maybe to me too? The door closed. Could I get in our car and hide in the back seat? Stacy would drive to the mall, leave the car, I'd get out and find someone to help me, except... What if Wes changed his mind and drove our car? Or if Stacy saw me, what would she do? She was scared of him too. If Darra sat in the backseat and found me, would she tell her mom I was there? Would they tell Wes? I didn't dare try it. What if I hid under the boat, near the garage door, and slipped out when the door opened quickly before it went down? It was dark outside. I could hide until both cars are gone and then start walking? Not much of a plan, I knew, but it was all I had. If you want to find out what happens to Wren and Darra in this situation, and also 6 years later when they meet up at summer camp, you are definitely going to want to pick up this book, Hidden. I have a link in the description for you, or you can pick it up from your local indie bookstore. And now I'm so excited to be chatting with Helen Frost about this story, and let's get right to it. All right, readers, I am here with Helen Frost, and we are going to be talking today about her book, Hidden. Helen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. It's really fun to be here.
Yeah. So like I said, we are going to talk about your book Hidden today, but I've read several of your other books, and they are also novels in verse or books written in poetry. And so I'm curious if you always knew that you were going to be a poet and use this form to tell a story, and maybe why you made the decision to tell your stories in poems.
Yeah. You know, it wasn't exactly a decision. It was more of a process for me, where I grew up. My first experiences in writing and publishing were all in poetry. You know, but I was writing for a long time. I was writing poetry for adults, and then I started writing some books for children, and I was writing in prose. And so, you know, trying to get a handle on picture books, or I had one novel that was never finished, but, you know, I worked for quite a while on a novel in prose. And then when I was working with teenagers, and I started writing poems in the voices of teenagers. And I was working in the form of sestinas, and those developed into Keisha's House, which was the first book that I had published for young readers. And it was successful and popular. And it was kind of after I finished writing that book, I thought, oh, I'm a novelist. It was like, it was just, I hadn't set out to write. I don't think I had set out to write a novel in poems. But once I had done that, I realized that I had combined a lot of different things that I'd spent a couple of decades learning, both writing poetry and learning how to write for children and teenagers. So then I really loved doing that. And I had a wonderful editor, Frances Foster, who encouraged me to keep, working in that form. So it wasn't so much of a decision as just something I gradually came to realize I was good at, or I could do it, and that it was an effective way for me to tell stories. And by that time, there were a lot of other people who were doing it too. It's become much more popular over the years. So.
Well, I love novels in verse, and I'm so glad that you do. I know that you often invent forms of poetry for your novels, and so I'm curious about that process, and also how you decide which types of poems that you invent belong in which types of stories.
Yeah, I mean, for some, it's especially a couple of my earlier books, it was, the form and the story were very integral to each other. Like the braid, I braided the edges of the different poems as I wrote, and it was very complex, and it went hand in hand. The story developed as the form developed. And like Diamond Willow was developed looking at a diamond willow stick that had these, diamonds with a bold
Yeah, I
shape.
was gonna say I could see the poem shape in my head, like when I think about the book.
Yeah. And so that, I kind of took the form from a form in nature. And, a lot of the forms that I use are traditional forms that I haven't invented them. Somebody else invented them, and then I've kind of worked with them to see how they will fit into what I'm doing. And so that's been really an interesting way to work it in work for kids, because it's teaching children something about the tradition of poetry at the same time that they're enjoying my books, I hope. Yeah. But the ones that I invent, it's just a matter of experimentation, kind of playing with language.
Yeah, and for those of you who do read Hidden, if you go to the back in the author's note, Helen tells you about a couple of the forms that she uses in here, and there's a surprise for you. And when I discovered that and went back and reread the poems a little bit different way, my mind was just blown. I was like, she is brilliant. This is like the coolest thing ever.
It was fun to do that,
Okay, my next question is that Hidden is told in the voices of two girls, Wren and Darra, and you alternate throughout the book, and they each get to tell different parts of the story. And so I'm curious, did you write the book chronologically? How did you decide which girl was going to get to tell which part of the story? If you could tell us a little bit about having those dual narrators and how that worked for you.
Yeah, and it was far from straightforward. It was this book began with a completely different story in mind. It was I had written The Braid before that, which was set in 1850 in Scott. The two sisters were separated by one leaving an island in Scotland, and I had the idea that 6 generations later, an American family could go back to this little island and discover a relationship with a distant cousin. And if you, on the front of the book, you see Wren is Black, and I thought that was, she was the child whose family went over there. And I thought that was kind of interesting, just thinking about how you don't always know who you're related to. And so I had worked out this whole genealogy and how that had come to be. And, it was convoluted in a way, but I wrote a whole version of that story. And it was in the story, Wren was sitting on a rock on this little Scottish island, and she had met this boy, David, and she was telling David her whole story. And when my editor read it, she said, "But Helen, nothing happens in this story." So two children sitting on a rock for 100 pages or whatever it was. And I mean, she had always been nothing but enthusiastic about everything I'd shown her. And it really threw me for a loop that she was not enthusiastic about this story. But also in that book, Wren was basically mute. She didn't speak. She was so quiet, you could hardly hear her. It was very internal. And so the other question that my editor asked was, why is Wren so quiet? And so then I started thinking about what had happened to her as a younger child that had made her so quiet. Mm-hmm. And that was where the whole story about, being kidnapped and so forth, that's where that came in. And then once I was writing that part of the story, Darra sort of peeked her head around the corner, and I've started getting very interested in her part of the story too. So then after I had written that whole first section with those two girls, I bet I wrote 1,000 pages of different versions trying to figure out how to bring these two girls back together. And finally, we came up with the summer camp, and that was easy because it's very familiar to me. I've worked at summer camps a lot, so that was familiar territory. And then, so the two girls, the summer camp part was done, the first part was done, but I really needed something to pull them together. And at that point, I was so frustrated with this book, I almost quit. And again, Frances said, "You're almost there, don't quit." so I went back, and I think then there's that middle section that I wrote. And it was somewhere around that point that I realized, we have Wren's point of view from the beginning and both of them at the end, but we needed this Darra's point of view earlier on. So I think it was another rewrite where I came up with that idea of kind of hiding Darra's earlier memories in the story that she was telling as a 14-year-old. So that worked. And I think there's so much that, the title was another thing that we had to figure out, but there's so much that's hidden under the surface of this story. So, it wasn't at all, a lot of people think that this book started with something that happened in the news. And it's kind of interesting because I think it was the same week that the book was published. There were 3 different articles in our local newspaper about children being inside cars that were stolen.
Oh, really?
It's definitely something that happens, but that wasn't where I got the idea. It was something that came later.
Yeah, just kind of like serendipitous or coincidental that like it all came out that way. And I love that you shared this process with us, because I think that especially for kids who are listening, or people who are beginning writers, they think that published authors, that people who've been doing this for a long time, just sit down and like whatever comes out onto the page the first time is what the reader sees. And I think it's just very humbling and validating to know that like so much time and energy and so many drafts and so many things that we don't see between the covers happens, and to know that if they're writing something and it's not great the first time, that's normal. That's the way it is. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Which leads me into my next question. And that is, if there's a student listening who is interested in poetry, either reading poetry or writing poetry, what advice would you give them, or what resources would you recommend to them on their own journey?
Mm-hmm. I mean, mostly with that, I feel like it's really important to not focus so much on the writing, but to focus on living your life attentively, observantly, enthusiastically, doing things that you enjoy, learning things, and then also keeping a journal so that you have a way of expressing your ideas. Something that I think is kind of, maybe this is an odd suggestion, but schools aren't teaching cursive writing, a lot of them, they're only teaching keyboarding. And I think there's so much, between the brain and the hand and the pen and the paper and the voice. I think writing something out in longhand, I love cursive writing. And even like writing a long letter to your grandmother, telling her what you did all day or something, we don't do that much anymore. Kids rarely sit down and write an actual letter, or, get a pen pal in another city or something, and go back and forth and write just letters, what you're doing and what you're observing. Get in the habit of writing things down. And I did want to show this. This is one of my books that is a good resource. I actually first started writing. It's called Room 214, A Year in Poems. And I think it may go out of print pretty soon. So rush out and buy it while you can.
Get your copy. I'll make sure to put that in the description.
Yeah, but anyway, the reason I mentioned that book is because I've initially started writing that as a sort of something that a resource for teachers to use by writing examples of poems in different forms. And, I did a lot of teaching poetry in schools, and it seemed like the only forms that teachers knew were haiku and maybe cinquain, but they didn't really understand. Hardly anybody understood that the long tradition of all these different forms and things that children can do. I mean, it's been amazing to me to see what kids can do when they try these forms. So that's one suggestion. There are, on my website, there are some other resources, and actually any author I would say to a child, any author that you love, look at their website and see what's there, because a lot of times we link to other places and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate to so much of what you say. I am also a handwriter. When I write things, I can think better. I think, like you said, I can type faster than I can think, and so when I get to it feels very stilted. Like I'll write a sentence, then I'll have to pause, and then I'll write a sentence and I have to pause. But when I handwrite it out, it takes me longer to get the thought out, so I already know what the next sentence is going to be before I get around. And I don't know if this is hoarding, and I see if I can tip my computer screen, but that right there, that cupboard is all my journals, full ones. And I love having them. I made this, right? So when you say have a journal, and the last connection is
a couple of big banker's boxes full of old notebooks and journals, and
they're so fun to keep and look back at. And then the other connection is my kids and I during quarantine, we had some in-town pen pals for something to just do, and we would bike our letters back and forth and just put them on their doorstep, and then they would write back to us, and they would bike them over to our house, and it was probably just a couple miles, but it was very fun. And now it was something to do, which was great, and now we have those letters.
I love the combination of that, of writing and actually that's other advice that I might have is do something physical. For me, if I ever get stuck, if I go out for a walk or if I go swimming, I think of a lot of things while I'm doing some kind of rhythmic activity. It's, helpful.
That's great advice. Great advice. Yeah, we can write and we can be active. All those good things.
Yeah, it's important. Both are important.
I was reading on your website, speaking of your website, that your first dream career was to be an entomologist, which is an insect scientist. And then over the years, it transferred into being a writer. And I was one of those kids who wanted to be a writer, not an insect scientist. So what would you have told the 12-year-old me or any of the kids listening today who would like to be an author? What would be your advice for them?
Yeah, I think my advice would be slow down. If you're 12, I think a better ambition is I want to write rather than I want to be a writer. I think, it would have never occurred to me when I was 12 that I could grow up and be a writer as a way of earning a living. I think these days children are more, they're exposed more to authors as people through things like this, but I don't know. I'm very skeptical about encouraging children at a young age to think of themselves as being a published writer. And I'm not saying don't share your work, sharing your work with your classmates and your relatives and so forth. That's a form of publication, but don't be in a hurry. I have seen a lot of kids who do. I have actually talked to a lot of kids who are 12 and want to be a writer. And one or two of them have become writers, so it's not, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying don't focus on that. The thing about the entomologist, that wasn't something that was like a dream career as much as it was an answer to when grown-ups say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so I was really little. I was like 3 years old when I discovered that there was such a thing as an entomologist. I just love the word. So I think it's kind of funny or interesting to me that I probably love the word as much as I loved insects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, for children who want to be a writer, what is it you love? And do you love paying attention to things in nature? Well, then, collect words about nature if combine things. But it's really important to just live your life, not to be too focused when you're too young. I mean, I'd say about 24, 25 is a good age to maybe start thinking about publishing your work. And of course, there are, very well-known writers who have begun publishing when they were younger. And so, I wouldn't say don't do it. I would just say don't be so focused on that idea of writing as a career that you forget to have something to write about. Pay attention to what are you interested in? History, science, people,
Yeah.
pay attention to what's going on. I sometimes say to kids, go out and have a fight with your best friend. I mean, obviously you don't do that on purpose, but don't forget to just live your life and pay attention, live observantly. And again, keeping a journal is a good idea. But I don't know any way of advising very young people about how to be a published writer as a career. I guess I've never really thought of it as a career. It's more something that I've just kept doing for a long time. I don't know. Maybe this is discouraging for children, but I don't mean.
I think you're making some very good points. And if we look at a lot of other very successful authors, like for many people, writing is their second career. Like they were a lawyer or a doctor or a firefighter first, and they had these experiences and they have this incredible knowledge base around a particular thing. And so then when they write a story about it, they can make it so realistic and make us feel as a reader like we're there because they know what they're talking about. And if you only focus on writing, you might miss out on that stuff that would make your writing really great.
I think I can't think of any of my books that didn't come out of some lived experience. If I hadn't been camping on a remote island in Scotland when I was 28 years old, I wouldn't have written The Braid. If I hadn't taught school in a remote village in Alaska for 3 years, I wouldn't have written Diamond Willow. If I hadn't devoted, 10 years to working with sort of what were sometimes called at-risk teenagers, I wouldn't have written Keach's House. If I hadn't worked at a summer camp when I was a teenager, I wouldn't have written Hidden, or, all these things, all these different experiences come into being in that way. So yeah, it's just important to do both, live and write. But don't.
I like that. Yeah, do both. Do both.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Well, again, we've been talking a lot about Hidden today. Another one of my favorite books that you've written is When My Sister Started Kissing. What's next for you? What else do you want to tell us while you have our attention?
Yeah, hold on a second. Again,
Oh, she has a stack of books. I love when they bring a stack of books.
I wanted to show you, I had 2 books that were published during the pandemic. And so I really want to tell readers about those because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to get out and talk about them so much. So this one is Blue Daisy, and both of these books won awards that I'm very proud of. Blue Daisy won something called the Best Dog Book Award. Anne-Marie McNamara has a website that has if you love dogs, there's like all these books about dogs on her website. I just love that. So that's one of my books that came out. And then
Can I just
All
interrupt
he
real quick?
knew.
One thing I love about that book is that it is alternating too, right? And one of the characters tells in poems, tells their story in poems, and the other one tells it in prose. And so as a teacher, I would love to use that book to show kids the difference between poetry and prose and have that discussion about it. So I also give a good vote for Blue Daisy.
Yeah, I mean, in every one of my books, I try to do something that children will learn something about poetry. And so this is for early readers, like maybe second, third graders, that sort of age, who wouldn't know they might not know what's poetry and what's prose. And so this is just a way of very gently letting them see that. So
Mhm.
yeah, thank you, Amanda. You sound like a really good teacher.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and this book, All He Knew, it's, it's a harder book in some ways for children to read because it's got a lot of sadness in it, but it also has humor and kind of there's this boy, his name is Henry. He has a very lively spirit. He is sent to live in a very bleak institution because he shouldn't be sent there, but he is. And his family is distressed because it's hard to visit him and it's hard to get him out. But I think I came to really love this child. He was based in sort of a way on a family member, the person that I never met, but I heard a lot about. And so anyway, that book, I think that's for slightly older children. Maybe I'd say fifth grade and up probably is who I would recommend this book for. Um, so those are the two main ones. There's also, I don't know if you know my books that I do with Rick Leader. This is an older one. This was the first one that came out, Step Gently Out. And I do have a cover for a new one that's called Wait and See that comes out next year. That's my only kind of book in progress right now. It's that I don't have permission to share the cover yet. So I'll try to get
We'll
that
have
out.
to come back to your website. Yeah, those ones are beautiful photography mixed matched up with your words, and they're great books too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Helen, and best of luck with your writing projects. And we look forward to checking out all of your books.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And thanks for all your teaching and sharing with both teachers and children, all this stuff. It's really nice to meet you.